So we can identify when price moves away from the trigger lines a certain distance or more. All right, well, so since I'm on a NQ chart here with a 4 range NQ chart, let's identify, when these bars are more than 3 points away from the trigger line there. All right, so we're going to identify, right, when the bars are 3 points or more away from the trigger lines. To identify our condition here, we're going to use the comparison solver. And then once we've identified this condition, we can then use that to then block signals here, as Ramesh is wanting to do. Let's see here. All right, so with the comparison solver, we're going to compare either the bar low or the bar's high price to the trigger line. The first thing we want to input is, right, either the bar low or the bar high price. So, looking at the chart here, right, if you're measuring, the separation, right, between a bar, well, if the bars are above your indicator, right, then you'd be looking at the low of the bar, right? The bottom of the bar, right, is going to be the low price. And of course, if your bars are, below, then you'd be looking at the top of the bar, which would be the high price, and comparing the high price, right, to your indicator. So for input A, that's going to be price. So if price is above our trigger lines, we'll generate a long output, to identify that separation. And if the bars are below the trigger lines, we'll generate a short to identify that. Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking I might, again, this is why I could keep saying it comes down to the details. So, if you're wanting to block signals, generating a long output when price is above the trigger lines, that would only block long signals, but maybe you want to block short signals, so maybe, so you really got to think about, what exactly, which signals exactly do you want to block? Is it only long signals or only short signals or all signals? You have to kind of, plan that stuff out, right, when you're designing your system here. So let's make this a little more universal, and we're going to block all signals when our bars, get separated by 3 points there. Let's see here. So for a long, we're going to use the low price, and for the short output, we're going to use the high price. Now the difference, as mentioned, we're going to look for 3 points of difference. So I'm opening up the settings here, right? I'm expanding the settings here so I can convert from ticks to points, right? I can convert from ticks to points there, and we'll put in 3 points. There we go. Okay, so there's our difference between, right, the bars and the trigger lines. And so input B, well, that needs to be the trigger lines now. So, all right, let's go back to the lizard indicators folder and then scroll down to the trigger lines. All right, there's our trigger lines, and our trigger line is already selected for us. Let's click OK. And there we go. So we can see, right, there's already a couple of bars marked for us, with a long output telling us that those bars are more than 3 points away from the trigger line. And there we go. So there's a couple of bars there that are more than 3 points below the trigger line. So with that, we're now going to feed that into a long-short modifier, right? Because as we can see, we're only getting a long output, or we're getting a long output or a short output, right? One or the other. And so to make this universal to block long and short signals, we're going to put this into a long-short modifier. And the mode, let's see, addition. Yeah, just use addition there. So I'll change the name of that. So we know that this long-short modifier is just doing the addition mode. And so now, there, we can see we're getting a long and a short at the same time. And so now, so that's our condition for blocking signals, right? And so next we need a signal source. Let's see here. Yeah, I'll do something very simple so we can actually see, right, the signals disappearing. So I'm going to use this slope solver here. And as we've seen before, this slope solver almost always has an output there. Almost always. Every once in a while, right, that SMA goes flat and there's no output. Okay. So clearly in this, right, in this uptrend here, right, our SMA is sloping upwards for quite a while. So we'll block the signals coming from the slope solver, right, is what we'll do. So we're going to need a AND node here. Now let's go back to our, basically our separation, detection here. So if we use an AND node here, let's go ahead and connect this up. If we use an AND node, what's going to happen is we're only going to see slope signals when price has that 3-point separation, right? So we can see long and of course short right there, right? But of course we want the opposite result. So instead of knowing when price has moved 3 points away, we want the inverse of this. We want the opposite output of this, or the inverse of it. So what we'll do, let's see here. I'm wondering if, yeah. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. So what I was going to do is take an inverter node. So if I take an inverter node, if we look at that, right? So now, right, we are, our 3-point, detection logic here, it's giving us an output until price, separates by 3 points or more, right? And then we can see there's no output. All right, let's disconnect that. So here's our signals, right? Here's the signals coming from the slope solver, right? And so now if I connect in our 3-point separation logic, and there we go. So now we can see that this long output is getting blocked, right, when price moves more than 3 points away. And the same back here. Here we go. So as soon as, right, so our moving average is sloping down. So there's definitely going to be a short output from that slope solver. And we can see that here on these couple of bars here, where they're more than 3 points away from the trigger line, that there's no output, right? That slope solver output has been blocked. So using the inverter is one way to do it. But there's a more efficient way to do this. So let's connect up, our separation logic here. And what I can do is go to the comparison solver here, and I can adjust the outputs here. So instead of looking for, A to be greater than B, if we look for this, if we look for A equals B within 3 points, right? If I turn that on, there we go. There you go, get those outputs correct. There we go. Okay, so for the long outputs, I'm using A equals B within 3 points, right? So this comparison solver is telling me, if the low or the high of the bar is, 3 points or closer, to the trigger lines, then I get an output. So basically, just adjusting my outputs it's giving me the same results as using that inverter node, right? So now I can see, right, as long as the bars are within the trigger line, within 3 points, I'm getting an output. And as soon as those bars move further than 3 points away, that output turns off. Let's scroll back here, right? And there we go. There's that area there with no output. And so if I connect that into the AND node, I will get the same result. So the key thing to remember is the logic that you're building, so this separation logic here that we're using to prevent signals, right? Remember that when you're using an AND node, you want no output, right? So we want no output when that separation occurs, right? So you want no output during whatever condition you're looking for that is supposed to block signals, or prevent signals, right? So when you want to prevent signals, you make sure that there is no output, and that no output will then block the signals, with using an AND node. And all right, yeah, so Ramesh was saying he wants to block all signals. Okay. Yeah, so again, if we want this separation to block all signals, then, right, then, our logic that is, being used for blocking, well, when that logic is not blocking, we need to make sure that we get a long and a short output at the same time, right? You have to get a, oops, what happened there? Oh, wrong one, there we go. So you have to make sure that a long and a short output, occurs out on the same bar, right? You need a long and a short out at the same time. That way you can get a long and short signals, right, during all those bars. And then when you want to block all signals, make sure that there is no output. All right, well, that does it for Ramesh's question there. So I just made a simple adjustment to the slope solver here, where I turned on the output for a 0 slope, right? So when there's a 0 slope, there's an output there. So that way there's always an output here, so from our slope solver, it's always going to give us an output. And so now it helps us, or allows us to more quickly see when there is that 3-point price separation. Yeah, here we go. So here's a bunch more bars that are 3 points away from the trigger line. All right, well, it looks like that does it for Ramesh's question.